Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming for this. Apologies for the slight delay. My good friend Gregory, right before me, took a bit longer or started a bit later himself. Who knows? I will try and be shorter than half an hour. Probably I will go over some of the things that you've heard already. But I know that these sessions are somewhat separate, so I cannot assume that you've been to the previous session or any other session for that matter. So I will try and cover what is needed for my own talk. I'm going to talk about ChatGPT, but more generally, the underlying models that I like to call foundation models. You know, some people use generative AI, some people use LLMs, large language models. I refer to the Stanford study from a year ago that started to call those foundation models, and that name has been picked up by many other people. And with basically kind of a naive question in appearance, how can we trust them? Or rather, I rephrase it as, what maps can we trust? This is a new territory. Don't we need new maps to understand it better in order to make better decision, better use of it, and help us in our decision making? This is something I borrowed from our good friend Peter Insen at the opening session. Is the pace of acceleration of innovation is, I mean, the change is the only constant, we know that, but the rate of change is itself accelerating, and waves are even shorter and shorter as time goes by, and even to the point where even people used to exponential growth, like I am with startups, now we're facing something really strange. The growth of ChatGPT is vertical. It's not even exponential, it's vertical. Never seen. Even Netflix, Twitter, Spotify, Instagram had a growth that was slower than that. So what is really happening? This obviously gives us things to think about. So today I want to invite you to a journey. Let's walk together. You know, in every discovery, there are explorers like Christopher Columbus in the case of America. There are people who are mostly concerned about exploiting the conquistadores. They just want to bring the gold out of it, and funding. It was the Isabel of Castile and Ferdinand de Aragon. They were considered the first VCs in history, by the way. What brings me here, basically, so you understand my own biases. I have a background in AI. I wouldn't consider myself as a specialist, far from it, but I've been trained at Stanford HI, the Human-Centered AI Institute. I also have an advisory role with TRAIL, the Walloon Research Institute. I've been mostly an entrepreneur, so you can see me as one of the conquistadores, maybe. Which one insights in big data, AI black belt that I launched at B Central, and now the last logo is Foundational AI, the new initiative that I'm setting up around these foundation models. And also I've been an investor with the NoShack fund in Odoo and Aerospace Lab, two extremely bright scale-ups from Wallonia, and in the case of Odoo, it's even a triple unicorn. And I'm part of an international network of VCs called Kaufman Fellow. That's the perspective that I'm going to have. So when I will talk about trust in AI, I'm far from being knowledgeable as a lawyer would be. So I will bring a perspective more from the ground and from a player in this ecosystem. My general consideration is this is a brand new territory and it needs new maps. Otherwise, we're going to get lost. Some of us are comfortable with going through the jungle and discovering new lands, but most of the society needs a more clear path to these new tools. Why is this so important? Well, this was also referred to by Peter Insen. Europe. It's a matter of European independence. We've lost our leadership in smartphones. We don't have many large software companies. Rockets, we used to be a leader with Ariane, and now the leadership is gradually moving towards SpaceX. In GPS, we took a decade, but we managed to build Galileo. If we compare ourselves to Starlink, there's the Iris Square project to compete. Anyway, so it's contrasted. We tend to be not leaders; we're more followers. What about AI? And as much as I support and I love Europe, if you look at this, for instance, the ranking from Forbes, the AI 50, with AI companies that have raised 400 million, 90 million, 74 million, most of them come from California. A couple come from other places, but you don't see large European companies or startups or scale-ups or unicorns doing AI. There are a few exceptions, as always, of course. There is DeepMind in London doing amazing work, but note that they were acquired by Google. There's Stability also in London. There's Hugging Face in Paris. I mean, there are, I'm not saying that there are no large companies in AI in Europe, but not to the extent that it's happening in the US. And so this is getting me worried. And it also raises an issue of trust. How can we give that much trust in a technology that is mostly dominated by US players? And again, this amazing growth that is taking everyone by speed to the point where we see now calls for moratorium to stop anything further than GPT-4. This recent news about Italy banning ChatGPT, although I understand it's mostly around GDPR issues. So, we definitely need to look at this. I'm usually a techno optimist. I'm usually very much like Gregory that you've seen before, maybe. I love technology. I think it brings lots of positive things, so many positive things. So first of all, I wanted to cover what works well to show that I'm aware of what works well. Getting a little bit back to GPT-3 2 years ago already, and it didn't raise that much. It was the underlying engine behind all this. It didn't raise that much enthusiasm. It did raise some enthusiasm from the people in NLP field. Was amazing for them, but not for the general public. The basic mechanism, as most of you probably know by now, is to summarize, predicting the next word. The advantage is it's a autoregressive phenomenon. You can train on you give it a corpus. You don't need to pre-label the data. It learns by itself, so to speak, and predicting the end of a sentence. It's actually amazing. It even surprises practitioners in the field. How can a so simple mechanism achieve the results that we're seeing today, whereas it can be said that it's almost just an autocomplete on steroids, but an autocomplete that has been digesting billions of web pages and the entire Wikipedia and many other sources. And we've seen the growth. I mean, people who've been following this since GPT, GPT-1, GPT, GPT-2, GPT-3, everything that Google was doing as well with BERT. Google has been, we don't talk about them that much, but they had been extremely active in the early models with the transformer model. In the rise of parameters, what is noticed, you can see here a comparison of a few tools from OpenAI. First one, ADA, 60 million parameters, that was able to do simple text classification, text, a little bit of text generation, basic question answering. And then the more parameters that you add, 1.5 billion, translation, semantic classification, then 10 billion parameters, complex text summarization, text sentiment analysis, and DaVinci, which was basically GPT-3, abstract summarization, text-to-speech, determination of cause and effect. So some quite amazing things, and now we're even way beyond. A rise in computational power needed, and this is only up to 21. So it's getting even better or worse. I mean, the size of those models is just going through the roof. The compute resources are just amazing. This, by the way, goes much faster than Moore's law, right? This is like times 200 in just a few years. One of the fascinating aspects of LLMs, of large language models, is their emerging properties. This is something that you will see that it leads to both reasons to be enthusiastic and also reasons to be worried. So emerging properties are properties that were not expressly designed in the conception of the tool, excuse me, but that appeared and were discovered. And probably we haven't discovered all the emerging properties. Some are still hidden in the basement of those foundation models. So they've become better at all those typical NLP tasks, summarization, classification. They're able to answer questions. There's one-shot learning. For those of you who are not familiar with the one-shot or few-shot learning of LLMs, I would advise you to take some time to really understand this. When you give a prompt that itself contains the way to answer, well, it's a way to program the LLM, and it will come back with the answer. Excuse me. And what has been noticed is that those emerging properties improve with the increase in size. The bigger the model, the more properties emerge. Again, this is surprising. Even people in the field don't truly understand how it appears. So this is a paper that I've quoted from Archive. Sorry. Emergent abilities of large language models. People have been noticed when faced with some tasks like mod arithmetic, word unscramble, truthful QA, and so on. The models tend to score at 0, so they cannot do it at all. And all of a sudden, starting at 1 billion parameter, they start to be able to do those tasks. And at 100 billion parameters, they're performing quite well. And they can go to and achieve 50%, 70%, 90% in some cases. So, and those, remember, those are emerging properties. The tools were not designed to be able to do that. It's quite unusual in human engineering. Usually when you build a plane, an Airbus plane, it's been designed to do something, and we know more or less, more than less, why it flies and how it flies and the speed, and this can be modeled beforehand. With those LLMs, there are properties that emerge. This is also an introduction to the reason why we could or we should be worried. Is we don't know all those emerging properties. They are discovered almost like a psychologist looking at some new personality and inquiring about it and asking questions. Oh, all of a sudden something appears. There have been, we've seen with the Bing Plus ChatGPT that there was some dark personality that could appear after long questioning. Of course, the companies behind that are fast to plug the holes and to make a better version. But in the meantime, who knows who could have been troubled by this dark personality that appears in those emerging properties. It can talk code. We know that it can be a tremendous productivity enhancer for programmers or coders with Copilot. Again, this is about the one or few shot learning. You give one example in your prompt, and all of a sudden the model is able to understand what you're looking for and apply it to itself. It's a very much uncharted territory. We don't know all the few-shot learning capabilities of those models because they're not documented. They have not been built explicitly for that. Another example, which I think is cute and promising, is chain of thought. Probably some of you are not familiar with the use of LLMs as chain of thought. Is if you get, we know that they tend to be not good in mathematical concept, right? If you come with Roger has 5 tennis balls, he buys 2 more cans of 3 balls. How many? You give it an example with the right answer, then you ask in a prompt a new problem. The answer will come out wrong. But if you explain your chain of thought, you explain, oh, Roger started with 5 balls, he bought 2 cans, which means he has 6 balls. 5 plus 6 equals 11. The answer is 11. Then the LLM is suddenly able to to answer the problem. So it's a bit like you were talking to a 4-year-old kid, right? A 4-year-old kid would be troubled by the first problem, but if you explain it gradually, slowly, then they would be able to do it. So this gives you an idea of the different type of intelligence that LLMs have. Laurent Hublet is starting to call that artifacts of intelligence. It's surely not intelligent as we humans know it. Multilingual abilities, that's quite amazing. Even if it's been trained very little in a foreign language, it can display some reasoning, quote unquote, in other languages. We can do domain adaptation. We can enable those models to know better or more about a specific subject by extending them. There are all sorts of fine-tuning, domain adaptation that can make, so it makes them very strong players in some field. There's this example from Google that their PAL model, they've enriched it with medical information, PubMed, a bunch of anonymized medical cases, and they were able to score much better than anyone else last year. I mean, all this is evolving as a medical, take a medical exam and be close to the level of humans. This is the landscape of large language model. I think we spent a bit too much time talking about just ChatGPT. You can see here GPT-3 in red on your left. It's just one of those models. There are many, many others, and they will come. Well, there are a handful of others, I would say. There are not tens of others because they become extremely expensive to build. So there probably won't be hundreds of different models, but a few handful of them. And you can notice how Europe is absent of this. Most, if not all of these models are US based, with a special exception with Bloom. Bloom is an open source initiative, started quite a lot in France and in Europe, but it's an outlier. Yeah, as I said, it's becoming extremely expensive. There's a kind of an arms race to build the largest data centers. GPT-3 was rumored to have been run on an infrastructure with 10,000 GPUs. You know that those cost a few thousand, so it's becoming extremely costly, and it's growing, as I said, much more faster than Moore's law. Transformer models, 275 multiplication in 2 years in the size. And Europe, again, is quite out of the game. So I don't want to be pessimistic about this, but again, we don't seem to be taking this brand new and very important tool enough into consideration. I mentioned a Stanford paper that considers those as foundation models because they can be adapted. You can build things, foundation. You still need to build a house, but you have something solid to build something upon. And now we're starting to question the solidity of those foundation. How solid is it? How can we trust it yet? ChatGPT, everything boomed. You can do dialogue, reasoning. Even goes even further. You can write in style of rap battle. You see videos like this everywhere, like 6 ways to build your startup with ChatGPT, blah blah blah. Can do copywriting, coding for you, and so on. Microsoft is integrating it, deeply into its Office suite. So many things are moving. What made the difference? RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback. Won't go into that, but at least there was a human factor, a human in the loop, taking care. Grading the outputs from those models. That brought a significant improvement and a way to remove the toxic content and the toxic response. But you cannot guarantee that you've removed all the toxic content. So how and where does it go wrong now, and why should we be concerned? This is quite unusual for me because I tend to be not that of a critic of technology. I tend to love technology and for the good it brings. But still here we cannot help but be troubled by those concerns. Well, first, the user's concern. Anyone who's been using ChatGPT for a while has been faced with plain wrong answers, even in arithmetics, or it's getting convinced too easily that the answer is otherwise. Those obviously are improved, right? it gets it right now. Those examples, some of these are old. Well, they are 1 month old now. They fixed those weaknesses, some of these weaknesses. The thing is, not only does it give a wrong answer, but it's not even conscious that it's giving a wrong answer. No, it's not conscious at all. So it doesn't know what it doesn't know. It's a bullshitter, as some people have called ChatGPT, but it's a too confident bullshitter that doesn't even know that it's BSing. It's another well-known concern is LLMs have no representation of reality. Like they don't know how to fry an egg. Literally, you can ask, how do you open an egg? Things that are natural for us humans. Those LLMs have a hard time. It's not entirely true. Some people have argued that they do have some representation of reality. Why? Because there is a significant representation of reality that is encapsulated in language. Language itself is some kind of representation of reality. It's not a representation of physics, for instance, but it is some representation of reality. It's bad at physical reasoning. The large ball crashed right through the table because it was made of steel. What was made of steel? And ChatGPT tends to be wrong on questions like this. It sounds like the large ball was made of steel. Steel is strong, So it thinks that the table was made of steel. So it lacks a representation of the world. And maybe this is the worst from a user's point of view, is what we start to call hallucination. It's talking about things that don't exist at all. The example here is in French, asking to compare des œufs de vache and œufs d'autruche, ostrich eggs and cow eggs, and it confidently, starts to talk for a few paragraphs about why cow eggs are bigger than ostrich eggs, because of this and this and that. Well, here it's easy to spot for us as humans, right? But if you ask, oh well, about the GDPR, can you tell me what the age of consent for a minor around his digital is in such and such country? And by the way, it's something that is different from a country to another. You cannot trust what ChatGPT answers. Although, if you use it as a lawyer or as an assistant lawyer, you might be tempted to use it because it sounds so well written, and it can even reference articles of law, but those are sometimes right and sometimes completely missing the point. Some people have summarized this as follows. It's ChatGPT and those tools tend to have the verbal ability of a 40-year-old and very confident with that. So someone who's quite assured, but they have a world representation and the logic ability of a 4-year-old. And the 4-year-old can hijack the adult, right? It can drag and bring the adult to say things that can be complete nonsense. Besides user concerns, we should have concern as a society. There have been a study. I mean, there are many. Obviously, each of these slides could deserve his own discussion for 10 minutes. But I'll take just one example of us giving too much trust. There's been an experiment with a judge using an AI to influence, should we give bail to prisoners and release them early or not? And they had an AI to help them with their decision. And they tended to, although the judge knew that they were still in full control and they could decide regardless what the AI was saying, we noticed that they tended to follow too often the advice from the AI. So they would trust the AI more than their own 30 years of experience. So we should be aware of that when we insert an AI in a process. Even if we say to the person, a doctor or a lawyer, you're still in full control, you can decide. It's not always right. You should not trust 100% that what it says. People tend to trust it, maybe not 100%, but 99%, to trust it too much in some cases. Or some people would be anti-AI and they will do the other way. So we should be concerned about, this is the way that we humans react to those technologies. Biases, obviously biases could be a subject of an entire talk. AI, obviously, because it's trained on US generated content, reflects all our biases and racism and gender misuse and things like that. And sometimes they're visible, sometimes they're hidden. And we discover only after a while that this autopilot was was working not as well with the people of color than with white people. Why was that? Because it had been trained mostly on white people. And you don't know that. You don't notice it until, you know, someone digs really deep into inquiring about this. So those biases can be invisible. There's also the question of fairness, and partially solved by some algorithmic accountability. This, I mean, the example I'm using is mostly from the US style. Is your health insurance, you know, covers only some and some affections. Who assesses your eligibility for healthcare coverage? You know, and if you've been and if some AI has decided that you cannot be covered for such and such type of disease, and you become ill 8 years down the road, who will be able to track back what AI took what decision that has become extremely important on your health 8 years ago? You know, who will have kept the records of that? Who will have kept the version of the algorithm that was used to decide for you? So this raises, you know, hairy questions, and algorithmic accountability is one way to try and solve that. And we can have guidelines, of course. We tend to, when there's faced with a problem, we tend to say, oh, let's have guidelines about this. This is taken from some early guidelines on algorithmic accountability. You can see that it's old already. It's not adequate anymore. The model, the features or variables used in the algorithm, as well as the weights of these factors should be documented. Well, good luck to do that in an LLM. The models have become so complex that there's no way you can isolate individual weights anymore. Life-threatening consequences. In Belgium, we've heard about this story of someone dying by suicide after taking with an AI chatbot. This has raised a lot of concerns. And a couple of months ago, I was listening to a conference by Gary Marcus, a professor of AI at New York University, and he was predicting in 2023, we will have the first people dying because of GPT and those large language models, and here we are already. He was more foreseeing someone like following a medical advice or taking some bleaching chlorine or some stupid thing that it could regurgitate, but here we are. Even worse, it can do this at scale. There was an experiment, quote unquote, on suicidal teens that were picked up from social networks. You know, you can recognize traits of suicidal teens, and some startup had decided, oh, let's try this and that, and let's send them this type of message and that type of message, probably with some good intention, but with absolutely no ethical supervision or committee or whatsoever. So you would never be able to do this for any substance, but for things like this, we don't have the legal framework, the adequate legal framework for that. Obviously, many issues about privacy and safety. I see companies sending their information to ChatGPT saying, oh, can you rewrite this email and things, and they think it's innocuous, but they are sending the content of their actual email with the actual companies they're working for. So it's what they would consider confidential information. They're giving it for free to OpenAI and Microsoft in a sense. So very little concern about my data kept private. I've seen one or two companies, they change every name when they submit something to ChatGPT. They change the name. They make sure that they've replaced the name of any company they mentioned by some fake name, but very few do that. Are the answers safe? We know about there's toxic content that can be hidden, that has not been detected or taken care of by our LHF. So, and obviously we know there is a risk of immense generation of fake news and things like that. So basically, when in an era where we would like transparency, where the EU is pushing for explainability in their forthcoming EU Act, basically went from a black box to a black container. It's even much bigger, so much bigger than a black box, and it's even darker. We don't know. We have no idea what's inside of those models. For those of you who've seen and read the GPT-4 paper, there was a technical paper issued with the release of GPT-4 last week or 10 days ago. Well, it's 90 pages long, but 90 pages of pretty much nothing. It doesn't say anything about the size of the model. It doesn't say anything about the sources that were used. So we have a strong model. It says many things about how good it is at passing some tests, but we don't know really what went in there. We don't know the effort that was done to clean it up, to remove toxic content, and we are going to build the AIs that will be used in our companies that will interact with our teams on this black container. Yeah, and obviously from an industry point of view, I see European companies and European startups less and less able to compete with their US counterpart, and it can be worrying. Finally, some people say, well, LLMs will not be the path to AGI. The AGI is the holy grail. We hope to get to artificial general intelligence. So people are saying it's not the right path. We will need to reintegrate symbolic AI at some point. Otherwise, it won't work. We should come up with some ChatGPT plus SQL to help have correct information data, less hallucination. So to summarize those concerns, I've seen people saying that AI should be considered as alien intelligence. It displays some intelligence. It seems to speak our language, but it's alien. We don't know exactly how it can react. Sometimes it reacts like a kid. Sometimes it doesn't know much about our world. So some people are starting to interact with those AIs almost as a psychologist, interacting with a kid on an autism spectrum or something like this. And we've heard about this call for a pause in large AI development. I would have thought, oh, well, what purpose? It's going to be hard to stop that. And customers are jumping up and down, hype cycle on steroids. I think what won't go away is the appetite for people for interacting through chat. I think this is really the new platform for the next decade, like mobile was the platform for the 2010s. And if you see how kids are using telephones, again, hat tip to Peter Hinston. What can be done? I'm going to be quicker on this part. Well, from the user point of view, many users have a very naive point of view. They say, well, give me the right answer. I don't care. Just give me the right answer. Well, there's part of good news. Industry is working really hard to improve the mathematical aberrations, the hallucinations. This is a basic graph, but it's a demo that I did yesterday in Paris to Micropole, working on ChatGDPR, a pilot giving the right answer. We knew that it would give the exact right answer coming from the right page, so it's an improvement of what is done. The industry will come with answers like that. When you ask to industry, well, how can we trust what you're doing? They come up more with what they call responsible AI. Europe talks about trustworthy AI. The industry answers, oh yes, we're responsible. Yeah. It doesn't take a degree in language to notice that it's different. Trustworthy versus responsible. Responsible is, oh, we've done our best to ensure that we've paid attention to this and this and that. It doesn't mean that it's trustworthy. It means, as a company, as Microsoft, as Google, we've done our best to build this in a way that is responsible. Better than nothing, but is it enough? I was this Monday at the talk by Microsoft's VP on responsibility on AI and LLMs. They've come up with AI standards, lots of things. So it's we should applaud them on how comprehensive this is. It includes covers many things. It doesn't guarantee that it escapes all the risk, obviously. and moreover, who is responsible for checking this? Who is responsible for checking all the engagements that those large companies are taking? Who's guarding the guardians, as the Romans would say? If you look to the EU, well, the trustworthy AI framework, which is quite comprehensive, it's a very significant piece of thought and of legislation coming up. It's still not formally approved. It's raising many discussions, 8 factors here: accountability, human oversight, technical robustness and safety, privacy, transparency, diversity, non-discrimination, environmental well-being, and so on. But again, it's hard to check and to make it objective. How we're using this tool, how sure can we be that it's indeed that it's fair in this and that respect? So the hope is to finalize this legislation this year. The effort started 2 years ago. I'm very curious on how this new LLM era will influence this European framework. Yeah, we're going one step deeper in the details of implementation. I think it's the devil is in the details, obviously. How are we going to require transparency? How can we make sure that these things are transparent, where by nature they tend to be not transparent? So at least I hope that I've, in a conclusion, and also I'm going to have 2 suggestions. At least I hope I've convinced you that we need new maps. It's a new territory, and the current maps, we have almost no maps whatsoever. So we need to document all this. And finally, a call. These will be my two last slides. First would be a call for our politician and industry, a push for a large open EU LLM initiative. And when I say large, I'm thinking about CERN, like what CERN was for particle physics. Maybe not 6 billion budget, but some significant budget in the hundreds of millions. That's about the price tag now to build this type of infrastructure, involving academia, industry, citizen. It can obviously leverage the effort that was done with Bloom, which was already a European, an open source initiative with a lot of European players. And secondly, I think we should have a conference. We should leverage Brussels' position as a regulatory capital. There's a lot of expertise in the country on AI and ethics at KU Leuven, on law at NADI in Namur, at FARI in Brussels with the ULB and VUB. So we have lots of experts around those issues. Brussels is seen by the entire world as a regulatory capital. And so I would suggest and call for other peoples to work on what I call a brace for a Brussels regulatory alignment conference on AI for Europe. And probably like we've done in this country for bioethics 20 years ago with the Advisory Council for Bioethics, I think it's high time to have an Advisory Council on technoethics. And obviously in terms of timetable, this would be better advised to happen all in 2023 because things are going fast, as we've seen, again, with the Italy banning ChatGPT for now. So things are moving extremely fast. And that was it for me. And I don't know whether we have much time for any Q&A, because I know we were trying to catch back on 3, which I've done. Thank you.